Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In the heart of Texas, a man buys a forgotten stretch of land to build a dream. But when a delusional neighbor emerges from the shadows, claiming ancestral rights, a quiet build turns into a high-stakes war of wills, lies, and sabotage. This isn't just property, it's a battleground. When I first stepped onto that dusty old plot of land, I thought I'd finally found what peace looks like. Just south of Fredericksburg, Texas, past the vineyards, past the antique shops, and down a dirt road where the GPS signal starts to stutter, sat my future. A battered 1920s farmhouse, half sagging under its own weight, stood on 5 acres of tangled brush and promise. I didn't see the cracked roof or the missing siding. I saw vision, potential, freedom. I saw the home I'd build for my family, brick by brick, beam by beam, a legacy away from the sirens and steel of Austin. I did everything by the book. Title search, triple-checked, boundary survey, certified and notarized, permits, filed and framed. I hired a reputable surveying company and walked the property line with GPS in hand and a county official at my side. There was no HOA, no shared roads, no architectural committees or board retirees with too much time. Just me, the land, and some very old mesquite trees. The first weeks were productive, even kind of exhilarating. I split my time between Austin and the site, managing architects remotely and coordinating the contractors who began clearing out the dead trees and installing a temporary fence line with markers. My vision was taking shape. A long rectangular perimeter, simple but firm, laid out for the future fence. We hadn't even poured concrete yet, just marked boundaries. That's when we met Wayne. Wayne Broadwell was, at first glance, a stock character from some forgotten Southern drama. A leathery man in his 60s with sun-scorched skin, white whiskers curling out from his jawline, and a perpetual squint that made him look like he was always about to say something profound or offensive, usually both. He introduced himself like a man giving a warning. Been walking these woods since Reagan was in office. Lot of folks get lost out here. Best to know where you are. My contractor told me about his first visit. Apparently, Wayne had wandered onto the job site around 8 in the morning, uninvited, coffee thermos in hand, and started giving suggestions to the crew. He pointed out a marker and said it was on his daddy's side of the land, claimed the old fence line from the 70s ran differently, and said they needed to pull it back some. When my guys ignored him politely, he just stood there for 20 minutes, muttering things like, "Damn shame what folks do to land that ain't theirs." At first, I shrugged it off. Every rural area's got someone like that, a self-appointed sheriff of the soil. I figured he was just testing boundaries, both literal and social. I had no interest in escalating. I even went to his property one day, about a quarter-mile down the road, and introduced myself. He looked me over like I was a diseased stray and said, "You one of those internet architects?" I smiled and nodded. He snorted and walked away. A week later, one of my crew called me in a panic. I was on a Zoom call with clients when I saw the notification flash. "You need to come. That guy's back. He's throwing sticks and yelling about the fence." When I got there, Wayne was standing just beyond the south fence line, holding a long branch like it was a saber. My foreman looked exasperated. The fence posts, still raw wood freshly set, stood silently in place. Wayne pointed at them and shouted, "You can't put this here. This ain't your land." My daddy mowed this strip every summer for 50 years. I told him we had legal boundaries, GPS coordinates, and that the county had already confirmed them. He didn't care. "Paper don't mean squat," he spat. "You ever walk this ground? You ever feel it?" I almost laughed, but then he slammed his stick down across one of the corner posts and cracked it clean in two. I took a breath, then another. I told my team to stand down, not to engage. Wayne huffed off, muttering that we'd regret crossing him. I asked one of the guys to document the damage, just in case. Still, part of me hoped that was the end of it. But the next morning, someone had cut down 4 of the orange boundary flags we'd installed. The wooden stakes were snapped and scattered like kindling, and someone had spray-painted, "Stay off B." The rest of the message was lost in a smear of red. That's when I realized this wasn't just some cranky neighborly dispute. Wayne wasn't trying to clarify anything. He was staking a claim, emotional, delusional, or otherwise, and I had just become the villain in his twisted little western. What struck me most wasn't the aggression. I could handle aggression. It was the conviction, the way he looked at my contractors like they were invaders. The The way he stared at me like I was stealing his past. And yet, not once did he produce a single document, not a plat map, not a deed. Just words, sweat, and a story about how his daddy once tied a rope swing, not 20 feet from here. We tightened security on site after that. I had a couple of motion lights set up on timers. One of the guys suggested we get trail cams, like for deer. Not a bad idea. My attorney, meanwhile, advised we start building a file. Photos, logs, timestamps. Don't engage, he said. Just document. You're in the right, but it smells like trouble. And trouble, it seemed, had only just walked through the gate. It didn't take long for Wayne to go from local nuisance to full-blown lunatic, with a badge he forged in his own imagination. I wasn't even surprised when the sheriff's department showed up on my property for the first time. I was just pissed it took less than a week. It happened on a Wednesday morning. I was in Austin finishing up a site plan for a mid-century retrofit downtown when my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls, voicemails, then a text from my contractor. Sheriff's deputy on site. Neighbor says we're on his land. Bring the docs. I dropped everything, grabbed the binder I kept for situations exactly like this. GPS survey, plat maps, recorded deeds, even high-res aerial overlays from the county's GIS portal, and drove the hour and change straight out there. When I pulled up, 2 sheriff's cruisers were parked half on the dirt road, half on my property. Wayne was already mid-rant, gesturing wildly at the temporary fence post like they were part of some federal conspiracy. The deputy who approached me looked young enough to still be renting. Good posture, polite, clearly not thrilled to be stuck in the middle of a neighborly pissing match. "Sir, are you Mr. Harkness?" I nodded, keeping my voice calm. "Yes. Owner of record, all 5 acres. What's going on? Your neighbor filed a report claiming you've encroached on his property. Says you're building a fence several feet onto his land." Wayne cut in before I could even respond. "Not several. 15 feet. That fence is running through where I used to mow. You can't just steal what's not yours." I opened my binder and flipped to the county recorded plat. "Deputy, here's the original deed, survey certified by Vaughn and Curtis Land Surveyors, GPS coordinate logs, and the official recording with the county clerk's office." I watched his eyes skim the paperwork. He gave a small nod and handed it back. "Ah, looks in order to me." Wayne exploded. "You think paper means more than a man who's lived here 40 damn years? My daddy planted mesquites on that edge. That's family land." "Mr. Broadwell," the deputy said slowly, "I can't override recorded land titles. That's a civil matter. If you believe there's an error in the records, you can challenge it through the court." Wayne's face flushed red. He looked like he was about to stroke out from indignation. "That's what you're going with, that I should sue to protect what's mine. Some outsider comes in with city lawyers and steals your dirt, and you say, 'Take it to court?'" The deputy kept his voice even. "That's exactly what I'm saying, sir." Wayne didn't say another word. He just stood there, breathing heavy, and then stormed off toward his truck, kicking up a cloud of caliche dust as he peeled away. The deputy turned to me with a weary shrug. "I'll write up the report, but there's nothing criminal here. If he keeps coming around, let us know, especially if there's any threats or damage." I thanked him, shook his hand, and waited until they pulled off. Then I looked around. My contractors had paused work during the whole episode. A couple of them were just staring into the trees, like maybe Wayne was going to pop back out with a shotgun and some frontier justice. I told them to take lunch, regroup, and that I'd handle it. That night, I couldn't shake the unease, not because the sheriff doubted me. He didn't, but because Wayne wasn't operating on logic. He didn't care about records or legal lines. His argument was rooted in folklore, feelings, and phantom lawnmower paths from decades past. Still, I thought maybe this was the worst of it. He'd had his tantrum, made his stand, got his sheriff's cameo. Maybe he'd go sulk in his recliner with a bottle of Coors and some bootleg John Wayne DVD. That illusion shattered fast. The next morning, I arrived to find 4 of our freshly set corner posts pulled up and thrown into the creek bed, their concrete footings smashed with what looked like a sledgehammer. Someone, and I didn't need a DNA test to guess who, had scrawled, "You will not win" on one of the sawhorses in black spray paint. No camera caught it. I hadn't installed anything beyond motion lights yet. Lesson learned. We documented the damage. Filed a police report. I called my attorney. He wasn't surprised. "Start building your case. This isn't about a boundary. This guy's challenging your right to exist out there." That weekend, I went to the local hardware store and bought 6 game cameras. Infrared, motion activated, waterproof. I wasn't just protecting lumber anymore. I was preparing for escalation. The final straw of the week came in the form of a community whisper campaign. I stopped at the diner on Highway 16 to grab coffee, and the waitress, a sweet older woman named Jan, gave me a strange look as she filled my cup. "You the architect building out near Hollow Creek?" "Yeah, that's me." She hesitated. "You know, folks say you're trying to run an old man off his land." I blinked. "What?" She leaned in, whispered, "Wayne told people you're claiming land that's part of his family's heritage, that he asked you kindly to stay off it, and you sent lawyers after him. Said you're trying to build some development." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Jesus, I'm building a single home for my wife and kid." Jan gave a sympathetic look, but didn't say more. The message was clear, though. Wayne wasn't just fighting me in person. He was fighting me in the court of public opinion, one plate of chicken fried steak at a time. I left a generous tip and drove back to the site in silence, already plotting my next move. I didn't think the old bastard would actually follow through. I figured the cop visit was Wayne's big play. Throw a tantrum, call in the sheriff, try to scare me off. But no. A week after the fence post smashing and diner gossip campaign, I received a bright white envelope from the Gillespie County Clerk's office. It wasn't junk mail, it was a summons. Wayne was suing me. The lawsuit was written like someone had dictated it straight from a bar stool. It claimed that part of my lot, specifically the southwest corner, where we'd been working on grading for drainage, overlapped with what Wayne described as ancestral land belonging to the Broadwell family, dating back prior to formal cadastral mapping. There were attachments. I flipped through them with disbelief morphing into amusement, then boiling into fury. First, there was a scanned, hand-drawn map, yellowed artificially with a sketched fence line labeled Dad's Mow Path. Then, a letter from his grandfather, written in looping cursive that looked suspiciously like modern handwriting and conveniently referenced a gentleman's agreement never recorded but honored among men. It was dated 1983, typed on what was supposed to be aged paper, but was clearly inkjet printed on copy stock. And then the kicker, a blurry black and white photo of a man next to a rusted tractor with Broadwell scrawled on the back in marker. The caption claimed this was proof of generational use. I almost laughed. Almost. Because then I realized this wasn't meant to convince a rational person. This was for a judge who might sympathize with old Texas roots. This was about narrative, not truth. I called my lawyer, Mark, and drove straight to his office. I dumped the documents on his desk like I was dropping off a crime scene. He picked them up one at a time, flipped through them, and let out a low whistle. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "Wish I was." Mark leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head. "This guy is playing the folklore card hard. Wants to paint you as the city slicker developer who rolled in with GPS and lawyers to steal land from the locals. Well, we've got actual proof. I mean, I have the certified land survey. I have the deed history." He nodded. "Yeah, and we'll use all of it. But that won't stop him from dragging this out and muddying the water." So we went on the offensive. Mark filed a motion to dismiss, backed by the full record of my title chain, going back over 70 years. We ordered an independent verification from 2 additional survey firms, both of which confirmed the boundaries were accurate and legally recorded. We also began pulling public records on Wayne. And that's where things got interesting. Turns out, Wayne Broadwell had never actually recorded ownership of his own land in his name. His residence was still registered under a woman named Evelyn Sanders, born in the 1930s, currently listed in hospice care in Austin. Digging further, we discovered that Wayne's full legal name was Wayne Rivers. Broadwell was his mother's maiden name, which he'd apparently used interchangeably over the years. So this self-declared land protector wasn't just staking a claim based on nostalgia. He was asserting legal ownership of land while squatting on property not even legally his. I didn't say a word to him. No confrontation. I didn't need to. Mark and I quietly built our case, adding every scrap of verifiable data we could find. We submitted requests for satellite imagery to confirm land use history. We even found an old planning map from 1995 showing the exact lot boundaries unchanged from today's configuration. No mysterious shifts, no missing parcels. Meanwhile, Wayne doubled down on the showmanship. One of my guys spotted him handing out photocopied flyers at the local gas station. They had a grainy image of my face, pulled from my company website, next to bold red text, "Stop the land grab. Out-of-town developer steals from Texas families." There was even a QR code leading to a janky website, one page, Comic Sans font, auto-playing country music, and a rambling statement from Wayne about inherited blood rights. It read like the manifesto of a man who lost a game of Monopoly and blamed the IRS. But the thing that rattled me most was the reaction from some of the locals. I overheard a clerk at the hardware store mutter something under his breath as I paid for bolts. 2 people refused to sell me gravel, claiming they were all out. It wasn't a total shutdown, but the air had changed. I could feel it in the sideways glances and forced smiles, so I fought back the only way I knew how, with evidence. I started documenting everything: drone footage of the site, time-stamped GPS coordinates, records of every permit. We uploaded the documents to a private Google Drive folder titled Proof of Ownership and shared it with the sheriff's office and county officials. I wasn't just defending land, I was defending reality against a man who had decided he could invent his own version of it. The next court date was set for the following month. Until then, I kept my head down and let the facts pile up. Wayne? He kept talking. And soon, he'd talk too much. It was a Friday afternoon when the second 911 call came in. Not to me, to dispatch. I didn't even know about it until 3 sheriff's units rolled up to my build site like I was holding hostages behind drywall. I was standing by the newly framed foundation with my lead contractor going over pier placement when I saw the cruisers kicking up dust in the distance. The sight of them, again, made my stomach drop. This wasn't a welfare check. 3 cars meant something bad or something stupid, and knowing Wayne, it was probably both. The officers came out fast, hands on belts, eyes scanning the area. One of them approached me, while another started talking to my crew, and the third, a sergeant by the looks of him, headed toward the property edge where Wayne stood puffed up like a pissed-off mall security guard. His truck was parked at an angle with the driver's door still open, hazard lights blinking like an accusation. "Sir," the officer in front of me said, "we received a call about an alleged assault with a weapon. You matched the description of the individual named in the report." I blinked. "Assault?" "Yes, sir. Your neighbor claims you threatened him with a shovel. Said you told him, and I quote, 'You'll be buried right here if you step onto my land again.' It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so serious. A false accusation of violent threat, that wasn't just a neighbor spat anymore. That was felony-level territory, if believed. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the Nest app. I had installed a motion-activated camera just 3 days prior, mounted above the front porch. It didn't cover the whole property, but it had caught me. That morning, sitting on the porch for over an hour with my coffee, a pencil, and a sketch pad. The timestamp overlapped exactly with Wayne's alleged assault. I handed the phone to the officer. "You might want to take a look." He did. His eyebrows lifted slowly as he watched the footage. He turned the screen to show the sergeant who had just finished hearing Wayne's side of the story, apparently delivered with Shakespearean intensity. The sergeant watched for 30 seconds, then turned toward Wayne. "Mr. Broadwell," he said sharply, "this footage contradicts your statement entirely. At the time you claimed Mr. Harkness assaulted you, he was seated at least 100 feet away, with no weapon in sight." Wayne's mouth twitched. "That camera doesn't show what happened when he came down. It doesn't cover the west side. He came down later. You just didn't see it. The sergeant didn't buy it. You called in a felony assault report with a weapon, Mr. Broadwell, and you provided a timeline that does not match observable evidence. That's a serious issue." Wayne's eyes darted between the officers like a kid caught shoplifting. "So what? Now you're on his side. You think his little city camera means he's clean?" "No," the sergeant said calmly. "But I think we have enough to document a false report, and you're on notice for interfering with an ongoing construction site." Wayne backed off, but not before muttering something under his breath that sounded like a mix between a curse and a folk spell. The officer stayed on site for another 20 minutes, took statements, copied my footage, and warned Wayne to stay clear of the property until court proceedings were over. As they left, one of the younger deputies pulled me aside. "You ever think about getting more cameras? I'd suggest the good kind, with cloud backups. This guy's escalating." No shit. That night, I reviewed the footage again, just to burn the absurdity into my brain. Me, coffee, sketchpad, absolute stillness. And meanwhile, Wayne had marched up to the county with a story about shovels and shallow graves. The next morning, my inbox had 3 emails with subject lines like "new comment on your company Facebook page" and "suspicious review left on Yelp." I clicked through and found, surprise, 1-star reviews calling me a violent land thief, aggressive outsider, and someone who uses threats to silence locals. No names attached, no real detail, just slander. I didn't bother replying. I just forwarded everything to Mark. He called me within an hour. "You want the good news or the bad?" Hit me. Good news. We've got enough now to build a full narrative of harassment, including video evidence of a false police report. This plays very well in court. Bad news. I think he's starting to get desperate, which means stupid and potentially dangerous. I didn't doubt it. The man had clearly moved past reason. He was trying to fabricate enough chaos to make someone else step in, a judge, the police, anyone, and rule in his favor just to make it stop. But I wasn't going anywhere. That weekend, I drove to San Antonio and dropped nearly $2,000 on a new camera system with 4K resolution night vision, solar backup, and multi-point cloud storage. I installed 4 units around the property, including 2 pointed toward Wayne's line. I also set up an automatic alert system. Anytime there was movement near the edge of my property, I'd get a ping. I figured it was just a matter of time before he came back. I was right. I thought the fake assault report would have slowed him down. That maybe the warning from the sheriff, the video evidence, the possibility of charges, that it might knock some sense into him, but Wayne was too far gone for that. Whatever warped version of justice he was chasing, he was willing to blow through every legal and ethical stop sign to get it. I got to the site early on a Monday. The air was sharp, just cool enough to make the morning coffee worth drinking slow. I did my usual round, checked the cameras, inspected the supplies, and greeted the crew. Everything looked normal at first, but when I walked to the southern edge, something stopped me cold. Red survey tape, the plastic kind used by land surveyors, was fluttering in the breeze, tied to brand new wooden stakes. They ran in a crooked, jagged line across the lower third of my lot, cutting straight through the area where we'd just poured the footings for the utility shed. A small plastic sign dangled from one of the stakes. Disputed zone, property of the Broadwell family. Do not enter. I froze. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. It was like stepping into a low-budget reenactment of a land war in some banana republic. Except this was Central Texas, and I was supposed to be the one with the deed. I followed the line of stakes and found the culprit at work in a bright orange vest, tapping into a tablet with one hand while adjusting a laser tripod with the other. He was maybe 30, wiry, wearing cheap tactical sunglasses and a badge that said Central Southwestern Land Integrity Division. That sounded impressive until I realized there was no such division in the state or anywhere. "Hey," I called out. "Who authorized you to mark this property?" He didn't even look up. "I've been hired to verify the true boundary line on behalf of the client." "And who's the client?" He looked at me like I was an idiot. "Mr. Broadwell, of course." I laughed once, bitter and sharp. "You got a license, cowboy?" He paused, then handed me a laminated card clipped to his vest. It looked like something printed off Kinko's and laminated in a middle school project. No state seal, no license number, just a name, Trevor Griggs, and the title Independent Land Authority, Region 4. I took a photo of it with my phone. "You realize this is illegal trespassing, right?" "Not if the land's in dispute." "Dispute or not, this is private property, and you've got no legal authority to be here." He shrugged. "Just doing my job, man. Boundaries are more fluid than people think." "Not in court, they're not." I called the sheriff on the spot. 20 minutes later, 2 deputies arrived, and within 5 more, Trevor Griggs was in cuffs. Turns out, he had no surveying license, no registration, no liability insurance, nothing. The badge was fake, the organization didn't exist, and the GPS app he was using was just a basic topography viewer downloaded from the Play Store. But the best part came when one of the deputies confiscated his tablet and opened the saved map. It showed my property lines, imported from a free GIS source with a fake boundary drawn over it in red, labeled Corrected Claim, per verbal family history. Trevor didn't resist. In fact, he seemed almost amused. Said he was just helping out an old friend. Claimed Wayne told him this was just an informal survey to prove a point. When asked why he placed warning signs and flagged the zone, he said, "Wayne said it might help him in court to show the line in." Public. It was theater. Delusional, unauthorized theater. And it was now evidence. The deputies took statements, photographed every stake, collected the fake badge, and hauled Trevor off to the station. I made sure to get copies of everything, then called Mark. He was thrilled. "This is gold," he said. "You've got physical evidence of unauthorized entry, impersonation of a licensed professional, and falsification of property boundaries. This isn't just harassment anymore. This is attempted land fraud." Mark filed a new incident report with the county and attached it to the ongoing civil case. He also submitted a formal notice of trespass and property vandalism against both Wayne and his contractor, and he began drafting a request for a restraining order, which would prohibit Wayne or any of his affiliates from entering or marking my land. That night, I checked the footage again. Every angle, every stake, every slow motion of Trevor hammering the earth like he was carving his initials into history. Then I did something I'd been meaning to do for weeks. I built a web page. Just a simple landing page titled, "What's Really Happening at Hollow Creek Road." On it, I uploaded the certified survey, the deed, a timeline of events, and drone footage showing the actual property lines. I didn't name Wayne, but I outlined every false claim and every piece of evidence we had disproving them. I left comments off. I didn't want a debate. I just wanted the truth out there. Somewhere Wayne's flyers and bullshit couldn't twist it. By morning, the site had over 200 views. By that weekend, it had crossed 1,000. And somewhere out there, Wayne was probably staring at another empty patch of dirt, wondering why his imaginary empire kept shrinking. After Trevor's arrest, I expected Wayne to vanish for a while, maybe lick his wounds, consult whatever conspiracy blog he got his fake land maps from, and rethink his strategy. But I underestimated the power of wounded ego and rural legend. The man didn't retreat. He reloaded. It started subtle. A few passive-aggressive gestures. Someone parked a pickup outside my property line every evening, engine idling, never stepping out, just watching. Contractors found their tires mysteriously deflating overnight. Orange construction netting went missing. It wasn't enough to call the cops again. Not yet. But it was enough to make everyone tense. Then the flyers started showing up. First on windshields at the local post office, then slipped under doors at the hardware store. I found one stuffed inside a bag of screws I picked up in town. Same formula, grainy image of my face from my website, next to huge red letters, "Beware, outsider developer destroying community heritage." Beneath that, a rambling manifesto from Wayne claiming I had falsified documents, bribed county officials, and was attempting to evict an elderly land steward from historic family soil. There was even a new website, poorly designed, all caps, with yellow text on a black background like a hacker page from the 90s. One page, just a scanned letter from Wayne's grandfather again, now digitally verified by some made-up group called Texan Airship Defense League. But then it got theatrical. One morning, I showed up to the site to find a tripod-mounted camera pointed directly at my build area. Behind it stood a guy in a flannel shirt and fishing vest, holding a mic like he was filming a documentary. He had one of those handheld camcorders you only see in pawn shops and bad weddings. "Excuse me," I said, approaching cautiously. "Can I help you?" He smiled without warmth. "Name's Rick. I'm a freelance journalist documenting local land abuse cases." "Freelance for who?" "For the truth," he said, dead serious. Behind him, Wayne leaned against a tree, arms crossed, looking like a proud stage mom watching her kid perform Hamlet. I stepped back. "You're trespassing." Rick turned the camera toward me. "Care to comment on the illegal seizure of heritage land and the reported threats against senior citizens?" I looked into the lens. "Sure. My comment is, get the hell off my land before I call the sheriff." Wayne piped up. "He's got the right. This is a public dispute. Transparency's the law." "No, Wayne, your fantasy is not the law. And neither is YouTube." They didn't move, so I walked away, called the sheriff, and by the time deputies arrived, the journalist had already packed up. But he left a business card. Rick Forrester, Independent Truth Syndicate. A search turned up no credentials, no news outlet, nothing. The guy had posted one video 2 days later, a heavily edited 10-minute mess titled "Developer Threatens Elder Texan Over Land Battle," featuring a slowed-down clip of me pointing toward the tripod while he dubbed in ominous music. The video gained a few hundred views, Comments poured in, mostly bots and burner accounts parroting lines like "Outsiders always ruin history" and "Fight for your roots, Wayne." It was laughable until I started getting emails. 2 clients pulled potential contracts from my architecture firm. One of them, a school renovation project, explicitly cited local controversy and reputational concerns. Another was a multi-unit housing concept near San Antonio, delayed indefinitely. Wayne wasn't just harassing me. He was dragging my name through digital dirt, and some of it was sticking. I called Mark. "We need to start documenting the reputational damage," I told him. "I'm losing real business over this circus." Mark agreed. He brought in a digital defamation consultant who took screenshots, archived posts, traced some of the burner accounts. At least 5 of them linked back to a single IP registered under a local ISP. No name, but it was enough for a subpoena. Then the dam broke. One of Wayne's supporters, a guy named Eli, maybe late 20s, camo hat, vape stuck to his lower lip, showed up at the sheriff's office and turned over a statement. Said he was part of a heritage action group Wayne had organized, that Wayne had promised him and 2 others that if the lawsuit succeeded, he'd split the land and let them build on part of the southern section. He said it was all but guaranteed, Eli wrote. He just needed people to help put pressure on the outsider, posters, footage, maybe shake the guy up a bit. He said it would never go to court. Eli had panicked after hearing Trevor might face criminal charges for impersonating a surveyor. He didn't want to be next. Mark received a copy of the statement directly from the county. It was enough to amend our legal approach. Now we were building a case for organized harassment with civil conspiracy intent. And that meant Wayne wasn't just a cranky old man anymore. He was a liability to himself, to everyone helping him, and to anyone too dumb to realize he'd turned his delusion into a recruitment campaign. The next morning, we filed motions for both an emergency restraining order and a defamation counterclaim citing lost income, reputational damage, and digital targeting. Wayne's flyers and fake video had now crossed into provable legal harm, and just for good measure, I printed one of those flyers, framed it, and hung it in the temporary site office with a sticky note, "Wayne's greatest hit, brought to you by lies, spray paint, and Wi-Fi." The crew loved it. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not temperature-wise, just sterile. Pale beige walls, wood veneer furniture, those stackable chairs designed to make your spine hate you within 20 minutes. I'd been in modern courtrooms before, usually for zoning appeals or permit hearings, but this felt different. This time, I wasn't here as a professional. I was here as a man defending his sanity. Wayne sat 2 rows ahead, stiff as a corpse in a tie that didn't fit. He wasn't alone. One of his heritage action flunkies, the vape guy, Eli, sat behind him, avoiding my eyes. Another local I recognized from the flyer circuit sat beside him, arms crossed, jaw clenched like he'd been coached not to speak. Mark was next to me, calm, focused, his briefcase full of every shred of documentation we'd spent the last month collecting, certified surveys, GPS logs, deed chains, expert opinions, drone footage, and, of course, screenshots and statements, including Eli's. Judge Manning entered, a tall woman in her 60s with a resting expression that said, "I do not suffer fools, nor will I pretend to." The case was called Broadwell vs. Harkness, Land Boundary Dispute, Civil Claim. Wayne's attorney, a local guy with more charm than merit, opened with a statement that felt like it was written for a TV show about dying traditions. He spoke of family, heritage, unofficial lines respected by time, and the urban aggression of modern development. Mark stood. No theatrics, just hard facts. He presented 3 certified surveys from independent firms, all confirming my boundary matched the legal records on file. He showed drone footage mapping our fence posts perfectly within those lines. He submitted Wayne's flyers, the defamatory website, and screenshots from the fake documentary video. Then he dropped the hammer, the statement from Eli. The judge read it silently, one eyebrow twitching slightly. "And Mr. Broadwell is aware of this." Mark nodded. "Your Honor, this demonstrates not only intent to deceive, but a coordinated attempt to harass and defame my client for financial and reputational gain." Wayne's lawyer stammered something about community organizing, but the judge wasn't having it. "I don't care if he formed a book club," she said. "What I see is evidence of trespassing, false boundary claims, impersonation of a licensed professional, and what appears to be a media stunt designed to distort legal perception." Then it got worse for Wayne. We called the surveyor from Vaughn and Curtis, a quiet bearded guy named Ben, who calmly explained how they had surveyed the property using RTK GPS accurate within a centimeter, and that Wayne's claims were geographically and legally impossible. Next up was the county records clerk. She confirmed that Wayne's so-called airship documents, the yellowed map, the typewritten letter, and the grandfather's will, had never been filed and were not recognized in any official capacity. Furthermore, the letter had been printed on modern office stock, and forensic review revealed inkjet printer ink, not ribbon or typewriter impression. Mark laid it out plainly. Not only are the documents forged, but they were created with the intent to influence a legal decision. That constitutes fraud, Your Honor. Wayne's face was a wax mask. No emotion, just locked jaw, glassy eyes. When the judge asked if he wished to respond directly, he stood, cleared his throat, and delivered what I can only describe as a monologue. My family worked this land long before the GPS and computers came in. My daddy mowed that line. My granddaddy rode it on horseback. This outsider with his digital maps and money thinks he can erase that. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the AC seemed to stop. The judge looked at him for a long time. Mr. Broadwell, personal history does not override property law. If it did, we'd be handing out real estate based on bedtime stories. Then she ruled. She declared my ownership uncontested and fully legal, granted a permanent restraining order against Wayne and any associates acting on his behalf, and dismissed his claim with prejudice, meaning it couldn't be refiled. But she didn't stop there. She issued a referral to the district attorney's office, recommending charges for filing false documents, impersonation via third party, Trevor, vandalism, and misuse of emergency services. Wayne's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. Mark filed our counterclaim that same afternoon. It included defamation, loss of income, emotional distress, and reputational damage to my professional brand. The judge allowed it to proceed as a separate civil action, pending further hearing. Wayne didn't make eye contact as he left. He walked out with that same stiff spine, but the pride was gone. Like something inside him had finally snapped and realized the war he'd been fighting existed only in his own head. Outside, Eli stood with his hands in his pockets. When he saw me, he looked down and said, "He told us we'd each get a slice. Said he had a plan." "You almost got charged for trespassing and conspiracy," I said. "That was the plan." He nodded slowly and walked away. The sun was high by then. My truck was hot inside, but I didn't mind. For the first time in months, I felt like gravity had eased. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to exhale. Mark climbed in the passenger side, flipping through his notes. "We're not done," he said, grinning. "But we just broke the spine of their fairy tale. After the ruling, things went quiet. Not immediately, but like a fire dying out after the last gust of wind. There were a few embers left to stomp out, but the heat was gone. The next few weeks were paperwork, follow-ups, and legal wrap-up. But emotionally, I was already moving on. The county DA opened an investigation into Wayne's actions. I wasn't involved beyond submitting evidence, but Mark kept me updated. Trevor, the fake surveyor, agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency. He admitted, in writing, that Wayne told him the entire boundary correction was meant to send a message and that the fake agency credentials were just for show. He even turned over a PDF Wayne had emailed him with instructions on what to say, if confronted. That sealed it. Wayne was charged with filing false claims, instigating criminal trespass, vandalism, and making 2 knowingly false 911 reports. The charges weren't massive. He wasn't going to prison for a decade, but they were enough to stick. And more importantly, enough to strip him of his state hunting license and gun ownership rights, thanks to the misdemeanor conviction tied to false emergency use. That loss hit him harder than the lawsuit. According to one of the deputies, off the record, Wayne was livid. Not about the fines, not about the restraining order, not even the formal ruling against his land claim. But the gun rights, that cracked him. He'd posted a photo every fall in full camo with a buck over his shoulders. It was part of his mythos. He disappeared soon after. No big scene, no public apology. Just gone. His truck stopped showing up. His porch lights went dark. A neighbor said his daughter had driven up from Careville and packed him out one weekend. He didn't even fight it. Maybe the weight finally sank in. The restraining order kept him off the property, but I kept the cameras up anyway. Installed a few more, actually, now integrated with solar panels and infrared trip alarms. We weren't taking chances. The fence got rebuilt with poured concrete posts and 8-foot steel mesh, anchored deep and laser measured. I even installed perimeter sensors that pinged my phone when tripped. Overkill? Maybe, but peace of mind has a price tag. As for the defamation suit, we won. Not millions, not some courtroom movie check that changed everything, but enough. Enough to cover lost business, legal costs, and pain in the ass tax. Wayne never showed to fight it. A default judgment. The court ordered asset garnishment, but there wasn't much to take. His estate was a half-finished ranch house and a reputation burned beyond salvage. Ironically, it wasn't just about the money, it was about the record. That somewhere in the system, next to the lawsuits he filed, now sat the counterclaim. Proven, validated, stamped. The funny thing, once it was over, people started reaching out. Other landowners, neighbors. A few even apologized, said they didn't know what was real during all that drama. One older couple brought me a cherry pie and asked if I could recommend a surveyor who actually has a license. A younger guy from down the road stopped by with his dogs and asked if I'd be interested in a neighborhood boundary workshop. He said, after what happened with you, a bunch of us realized we don't know where our own lines are. And just like that, I wasn't the outsider anymore. My wife came out one weekend with our son. We walked the land together, past the completed fencing, the new tree saplings, the foundation where the porch would go. My son pointed to a small wooden sign I'd hung at the entrance, something I'd carved myself out of cedar. Know your ground before you start a war over it. We laughed. It was half joke, half warning. I kept one of Wayne's flyers, too. The first one with my photo under the word thief. I laminated it and tacked it up inside the shed, right next to the permit board. Every time I open that door, I see it. Not to dwell, just to remember. Because where I'm standing now, this isn't just land. It's a monument to the truth winning, eventually, even if you have to drag it through every ounce of bullshit your enemies can fling at you first.